Hello, welcome to my podcast. I'm your host, Larry Liu, and today I'm joined by Ronald Bray. He's been on this
Hey,
podcast before, so welcome to the podcast.
thanks.
So let's reflect on what happens. I mean, we have some ballots that are still outstanding, I think, but it looks like we have a president-elect, Joseph Biden, and Vice
Yep, yep.
President-elect Kamala Harris. So just tell me what's going through your mind, before the election, during the election, and now as the ballots are counted.
Well, I was mostly worried that the Democrats would sweep everything, and they would have the House and the Senate, and I figured Joe Biden probably wouldn't last very long as president, and then Kamala Harris would take over, and they would do all these things that they said they wanted to do, like pack in the Supreme Court and just making Puerto Rico and Washington D.C. a state, and that what would happen is you would have one side, the left side, would become so powerful that the other side would never be able to check it, and that really bothered me. And a lot of people think that I'm this crazy right wing Trump supporter, but really I consider myself to be a liberal, and I did vote for Trump, but I don't like the idea of one side having all the power, you know?
So I think it requires some unpacking because, as you might be able to tell, there's a lot of people who voted for Biden and they, think that Trump is sort of like the devil, right? So
Sure.
so explain to the audience your reasoning behind supporting Trump as a liberal.
Okay, so the selling point for me in 2016 was his anti-war policy, right? He said that he was going to try to end all the wars, the African and Middle Eastern wars, and then bring home as many troops as he can. And I know that the opposite happened under Barack Obama, where I think he started something like 7 unofficial wars, and Hillary Clinton was his Secretary of State. And that was the biggest thing. I didn't like Hillary Clinton as a person. I don't trust her. I don't think she was in it to help anybody. I thought she was just, power hungry. It had nothing to do with her being a woman and had nothing to do with her calling herself a Democrat. I just don't believe that she's a liberal. I don't believe a liberal can support a government that participates in all these wars. And from what I understand, or what I believe, that they're only doing it to enrich certain people. It's all about like military contracts and the industrial military complex. It doesn't really have anything to do with trying to spread democracy or, you know, battle terrorism. I think, some of it has to do with terrorism, but it's not a democratic problem. It's a Democrat and Republican problem. They both do it, both sides. And I thought the best chance of that not happening would be to elect Donald Trump. And I think in that respect, he did pretty good. He didn't end everything. We're still in the Libyan war, but he, I think, made a lot of progress to wind down the wars and bring home troops. And I think all the Middle Eastern peace deals that were happening in the last few months are kind of proof of that. So that's what sold me in the beginning on Trump. I really just like him because he wasn't there. Because I don't like a lot of the politicians on the right or the left. And I figured, well, this guy, he's kind of like a pompous a-hole, but at least he hasn't been there the whole time. He hasn't put us in these positions that we're in. And
Yeah.
then what reaffirmed me on him was the way that everybody relentlessly attacked him, and like the media censorship and the constant lies and lies and lies. And he says a lot of crazy stuff, and some of his policies I don't like, but I don't believe that he's a member of the Ku Klux Klan or he's a neo-Nazi. I don't think there's any proof of that. In fact, if you look at his life in New York City, being a New York City liberal and the people he used to hang out with, I think there's lots of proof that he's not racist. So
Well, that we wouldn't be able to tell, but I think what Trump is for sure is he's an opportunist, right? So so
yeah,
when he was
yeah.
asked about the QAnon, the Proud Boy stuff, Charlottesville, I mean, he wasn't going out of his limb like an ordinary president would do, which is to denounce violence and racist mobilization. And I,
I personally heard him denounce racism at least 14 times over the years. He's literally said it. He goes, "I denounce racism," and the reporter goes, "But you won't denounce racism." And he goes, "I just said it." So I don't. I think that is a
well, but
total
what
manipulation of the
about
truth.
so the thing that
That's
catapulted
so
Trump into importance was the birther movement. So in 2010, 11, 12, he was saying that Barack Obama, and of course he emphasized his middle name, which is Hussein, right? Barack Hussein Obama.
yeah.
Um, he was probably not born in the United States of America, which was patently false. Obama, published his birth certificate in Hawaii. Um, and well, why was he jumping on the birtherism? I mean, if we had a white president, would Trump have done the same thing to question the birthplace of the president? So I think I'm not able to fully say that Trump is a racist, but I can say that he's an opportunist, and he's definitely trying to press the right buttons to get the support of white supremacists of this country. So and I think for that he should be denounced. Um, but then, so you made a point about the foreign policy record of the Trump administration and how it's different from his predecessor. I mean, my assessment of it is I liked his stance on um, North Korea. I think you know trying to find some kind of peace deal, meeting with
Sure.
with Kim Jong Un. I think that it was a reasonable thing to do. Um, if you mentioned the Middle East peace deals, so you're referring to Bahrain and United Arab Emirates, which were signing formal peace deals with Israel. Um, I'm not sure how much of that is because of Trump. I think there's a lot of, you could say, underlying machinations inside the Middle East, which of course you would have to be a Middle East expert to fully grapple with that. But I think there would have been a great possibility for those Middle East deals to be done without the influence of the United States. Um, but I would say it would be, but it's definitely a positive trend. Um, so what's your assessment of the Soleimani killing? So Qasem Soleimani was the number two leader in Iran, and he was leader of the Quds Brigade, which is a Iranian paramilitary force. Um, do you think that was the right thing to do?
Okay, so there's a lot here, right? First of all, let me just say that I think that by the birth certificate thing, right? I think I don't like that about Trump, right? I think it was ridiculous, and I remember saying it to a lot of people when it was happening that you know there's no way Barack Obama could be the president without being born in this country, and I I think that what Trump was doing is he was drawing attention to himself by casting doubt on Barack Obama's birth origin, and I guess you could say it has something to do with his name. I don't think it necessarily has anything to do with him being black. Um, and I would also like to say is I've been white my whole life, and I have never met a neo-Nazi, right, or a white supremacist. And I have a lot of family that are pretty rednecky, So I'm not saying they don't exist, but I think that kind of racism that you're referring to is a really small amount of people. And I was talking to somebody on one of your threads. I don't want to mention his name, and I was trying to provide to him evidence through census information and exit polls and things like that. That the real problem with America isn't, in my opinion, systemic racism. I think it's tribalism, right? I think that a lot of people from a lot of backgrounds have some level of racism. Doesn't matter if they're black or white, or Hispanic or whatever. But I think the biggest problem right now is tribalism. I think America, year after year, decade after decade, becomes less racist, and it has at least our entire lives. Um, but I don't think Trump needed to do that. I don't think that I think that message that he started back there with the birther thing is probably what caused him not to get reelected, because he ended up with more people hating him than the amount of people who supported him.
Well, but
And I don't
he did win 2016, though. I mean, so even with the birther thing, I mean, I think that launched his political career, wasn't it?
Yeah, but in 2016, no one took him seriously. No one thought he was going to win. So they took the worst things that he said and they pushed him through every media outlet, made sure everybody heard, oh, God, this guy said this and this guy said that. And they played it over and over and relentlessly drove that racism message to the point where he had a wave of supporters, but he had a wave of people who showed up and they voted just against Trump. I mean, that's why I don't think that
So
the
it's just,
Democrats
yeah.
stole the election. I think that they weaponized the media. I think they weaponized coronavirus response, um, and they used every kind of information manipulation possible to paint him as a racist, whether he is or not. And he put himself in that position. I'm not denying that. Um, I just wanted to say that, yeah, I don't agree with the whole birther thing. I don't think that somebody's name and skin color would make them like an enemy of the country, especially if they're the president. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So I think Trump he made his bed and he's got to lay in it. Um, in that respect. And the Soleimani thing, I tell you the truth, I don't really know. You hear the intelligence. They said that this guy was responsible for orchestrating all these different terrorist operations, and by killing him, we saved American lives. Now, if that's true, I agree with it. If it's not true, or we broke an international law that we promised that we wouldn't break, then maybe it was not the right thing to do. Now, that's you have to trust the intelligence apparatus, and who knows? I mean, I don't really trust them. So with that one, I just gotta hope that we did the right thing there.
Yeah, but it's a complicated picture, right? Because you always have to, with every policy, with every decision, you have to drill down and see whether it makes sense. I mean, so I mean, is there another area that of so I think an important question we have to ask ourselves is what is the difference between 2016 and this year, right? So I would think so. One thing that's very interesting is that you know if you look at South Florida, so the region where you live, and also in South Texas, these are very like Hispanic dominated counties. There was a swing in the Republican direction. I think like Miami-Dade, right, which was 30 points for Hillary Clinton in 2016, only went 8 points for Biden this year. And, the suggestion being that, you know, Trump is not, I mean, this year it's not like an all-white party. I mean, as it was in 2016. In fact, he was able to, um, increase his vote share among Hispanics, among blacks,
Every
and
demographic except for white men,
exactly. So, and I
even
think,
gay men. He got like 40% of the gay vote in Florida. That's crazy.
yeah. So what's very interesting is that, like this year, so like when he started his campaign in 2015, 16, and he said, Mexicans rapist, right? And he was explicitly anti-immigrant. He
But he
was
didn't say that though. Okay, he didn't say that. What he said, and he might have actually said the words Mexicans are rapists, right? And that's because he has really poor communication skills. What he was saying is that the cartel and MS-13, the people that we're in basically a war with, and we have been since the Clinton administration. It was called the war on drugs. Okay, it never ended. No one ever won. The cartel is more powerful now than it ever has been. They they do rape people. In fact, MS-13, it's not really the cartel, but they're like the lowest level of it. They're just like the raw gangs that end up, if you do good enough in MS-13, you move up into the cartel probably. I don't know. But it's their slogan is rape, murder, control. Okay, and this is real. It happens. On the other side of the border, there's warehouses full of drugs. We know where they are, and that's what it is. So there is actually rapists and murderers and people who smuggle children and steal children, and every horrible thing that you could ever imagine a human doing is happening right now on our southern border. And Hispanics actually know that. So when Democrats attack Trump over trying to protect the border, a lot of Hispanics that, not every Hispanic, I know everybody's not from Mexico or close enough to the border to know that, but enough of them know. So I think it has actually the opposite effect. You know, you have to attack Trump for things that he's actually doing wrong and not just make things up or take him out of context. Like the whole Muslim ban is another one, right? He called it a Muslim ban, which sounds horrible, but what he was actually saying is that we have to monitor the Muslim immigration to prevent somebody from sneaking in a nuclear bomb. And by the way, I can't believe it hasn't happened yet. I can't believe somebody hasn't brought some kind of weapon of mass destruction into America and let it off in like Miami or something. And if that did happen, there would be overwhelming consensus to blow up every country that we think is responsible. The the bloodlust would go through the roof if an American city got blown up by a weapon of mass destruction that was snuck in here by another country. It wouldn't be any time at all before the Congress unanimously passed some kind of declaration, and we would just start blowing people up and then, asking questions later. And we don't want that to happen. So that's my opinion on all that.
well, so with respect to the, Muslim ban, but that's
It's a
what,
horrible name.
so that's
Horrible name.
all it, well, but what's the executive order saying? Well, it's saying that 7 countries, including Iraq, Syria, and there's a bunch of other places, I think in East Africa too. Those
The
nationals,
highest concentrations of terrorism.
yeah, but those nationals would be excluded from entering the United States. And to me, look, this to me is already very problematic because, there could be, you know, so as you say, there's a terrorist activity happening in those countries. That's very true. And the United States is a country of immigration, and to say that, well, there's going to be some people who basically want to flee the terrorist violence. I mean, they're definitely not terrorists themselves, and yet,
Well, we don't
you
know
know,
that because there's
but
not any good records.
and then as a country of immigration, you're going to say, well, we're going to, bar all the nationals of that country to come into the United States. I think that's very improper. I mean, if you say you wanted to protect the United States from terrorist attacks and from importing terrorism, the way to go about it is by doing vetting, right? And that's what the State Department has been doing even under the Obama administration. I mean, the Obama administration accepted 10,000 Syrian refugees to come to the United States, and the process of it was very long-winded. It took a long time. It took a lot of vetting in order to allow these people through the doors. Uh, when I mean, so look, I grew up in Austria, and I can tell you the numbers, in my home country. I mean, it's 90,000, okay, 90,000, mostly Syrian, but there's also other nationalities, refugees that entered the country of Austria with a population of about 9 million people, which is the size of New York City. So, I mean, the
Isn't
United
there a
States,
lot of terrorism in Europe though?
yeah, I mean, we had the terrorist attack that
There's
occurred,
always terrorist
that,
attacks in Europe though,
well, that occurred a few
right?
days ago in Vienna.
But I mean, they've been like pretty much nonstop. Though every couple of like months I hear about terrorist attacks in Europe.
Yeah, but we have to be careful here. So in the Austrian case, I can tell you that the guy who did it, who was shooting up a bunch of people, uh, was an Austrian national who came from Macedonia, uh, and which is in Southeast Europe, and it has a Muslim population there, and he was sort of you know in the Islamic State when he committed terrorism.
Sure.
Um, but it wasn't a Syrian refugee. It wasn't an Iraqi refugee, right? Um, so to say that, well, it's those who are fleeing the violence who are going to be the cause of violence, I think, is a very inappropriate statement to make. But again, it's
Well,
like,
I think the problem was, and this is what we were told, and I don't know if it's true. And like, if I was in charge, I mean, I might just let them in because I don't want anybody to get hurt. But what we were told is that the ban was on people who could not be vetted. That in these countries they didn't have enough records, and there wasn't. We had no idea of knowing that if this person is a terrorist or not. You
well,
know,
it's
and
well, it's not
I
the
mean,
government agencies in those countries which are, uh, you know, putting through the vetting process. The vetting process is done by the U.S. State Department, and I mean, you cannot accuse the U.S. State Department of lacking the funds or the administrative capability to vet these individuals, right? So, I mean, so I don't think that so I mean, I think it's very problematic to exclude a whole nationality, especially in countries where seeking safety, life, liberty, right, is
sure,
extremely important.
but I mean, you can make the argument with, I mean, how come the argument's not made with all the African countries? I mean, even if these people aren't going to be terrorists, I mean, these are the poorest people in the world, and there's like genocides in Africa that we know about. We don't let out all of them in. You know, I'm not saying that we shouldn't, and
Yeah, but
immigration is a horrible thing, but I mean, it's like we're going to say that because these people, because they're Muslims, and we have this idea that Americans are racist against Muslims, then we really should just let them in so we can prove that we're not racist, but just ignore everybody else in the world that has problems. I mean, it doesn't
no, no.
make any sense.
Look, but that wasn't the point of the Muslim ban, right? I mean, the point isn't to allow every single individual from Africa or Middle East to come to the United States. I think the point is,
But why not though?
no,
If they
no,
need help.
well, the point would be that, like, you shouldn't be excluding a whole nationality
Yeah,
of
but we don't even talk about the Africans.
yeah.
That's the point. They had a genocide. We didn't even talk about it. Didn't even make the news. I mean, barely. I'm sure you heard about it, but I mean, we don't
Well,
even talk about it. Why
it,
why why do we talk about the Muslims and not the Africans? I'm just trying to point out that it doesn't make sense.
no, it makes perfect sense because
Why?
so with the Africans, I mean, we didn't do an Africa ban, right? So
We
we are
still
still
let them in.
we're still no, we still allow. Look, I mean, I mean, I'm not an expert with how the visa system works. I mean, I think there's like a diversity visa program where they basically pull immigration from countries that are you could say that the U.S. neglects with respect to immigration. Because we receive a lot of regular migration from Asia, from East Asia, South Asia, and Latin America, and of course Europe.
Mostly
Um,
people that have money.
yeah, right. So and then
No poor people. That's why they're not coming in, Larry. It's because they're poor and they're not on the news. And Trump didn't say. If Trump would have said, "We're gonna have an African ban because the people have diseases, they don't have vaccines, so we're not gonna let them in." If Trump would have said that, then right now we would be talking about why is there an African ban?
yeah,
It's all.
exactly. That's not proper. That's not proper policy. I mean, what you would do is you would
Yeah,
do
I know. I
a
agree with
vetting
you. I agree with
process.
you.
You would do
But
extreme
we're
vetting.
talking about now we're talking about like language and the news and communication and not reality. Reality, and I will agree with you, Trump shouldn't have said Muslim ban. He shouldn't have said Barack Obama doesn't have a birth certificate.
Yeah,
That's
but it was
horrible
a
to say.
ban. It was a ban, though. It was a ban on nationalities, right? I think that was improper. I mean, a proper policy would be to say you're going to have extreme vetting. I mean, that's not what he was doing. I mean, the normal policy of any administration, even under Obama. I mean, Obama was a deporter in chief, right? He deported more people, undocumented migrants from the U.S. than the Trump administration did, right? But it was that the Trump administration, like they screwed up on a bunch of things. I mean, not just the Muslim ban. I mean, like the cages on the border, right? Like the family separation policy. I mean, like
Yeah, but that happened under
that
Obama too. And as Trump said in the debate, is that who built the cages? I hate that. That's such a talking point. I mean, like
no, but the
from what
family
I
separation
understand
started on
is
Trump.
yeah, but no, it did not start under Trump. It started under Obama, and Trump signed an executive order that ended it.
I mean, well, I mean,
It's
if
see,
it,
this is
what
where we
well,
got
if
two
the
different
fam
realities
well,
clashing right now.
if the family separation, were to be an issue under the Obama administration, it would have been frontline
The
news.
cages, the pictures of the kids in cages, that was under the Obama administration. They even had to retract it from all the major news articles.
Okay, I'll do my research on that, so I'm not going to argue that
Okay.
point. But certainly, I mean, in terms of
But Trump
optics,
also
it's
said that
interesting.
it's from coyotes, and everybody made fun of him talking about coyotes. That's from human trafficking. So the reason why they were separated from their parents is because they weren't with their parents. There was no proof that these people were their parents. They were like smuggling people, which is happening all the time. Also, I mean, it's a really screwed up statistic, but America is like the number one consumer of human trafficking. So, and child pornography, by the way. So these kids are being smuggled in and out of our country all the time. It's a very serious thing that doesn't get any media attention. Like you can go on a road trip and stop at a truck stop and look at all the pictures of missing kids. Where are they all? It's freaky. So if there's 500 kids that don't know where their parents are, then I feel really bad for them. But if I lost my kid trying to sneak into America, then I would go back and I'd be like, listen, I'm sorry, that's my kid. I'll take a DNA test and then I'll go back to my home country. So you're telling me that these 500 kids, their parents aren't looking for them? It doesn't add up, man.
Well, so the major issue I think that we have to address here is what motivates migration, what motivates people to come across the border. I mean,
The
you know,
cartels.
yeah, the cartels, and
They're
we know,
fleeing the cartels and
well,
the governments over there that are crazy.
yeah. So there's a bunch of United States policies that we have to, dig into, right? So first is the war on drugs, which has been declared all the way back, I think, in the 1970s under Richard Nixon. As you say, it was stepped up in the 90s under Clinton.
And
Um,
they just forgot about it.
yeah,
Acted like it never existed.
right. So it's the United States policy, and number one, and number two is, when the U.S. was doing various military interventions in, I think, was it Honduras or something? I mean, um, so there's a bunch of countries where the United States is directly meddling with, and thereby firing up. I mean, not I'm not saying they're causing it, but they're definitely firing up the violence and destruction and the homicides that are happening in Central
Hey,
America.
they're doing all kinds of stuff. Like I like Elon Musk, right? But if you go to progressive outlets, they talk about how he manipulates governments and some kind. I was listening to Jimmy Dore, and I forget who he had on there. He had somebody on there, and what the guy was saying was that people like Elon Musk, they get involved in countries' politics. And if they want a resource like lithium or something for batteries for like electric cars, they'll actually manipulate them into some kind of like civil war so they can just get the the batteries for a lower cost, like the raw elements for these like electronics. And I mean, I'm not saying it's true or not, but I could totally see things like that happening. And I don't know. Yeah, I sure America probably is doing all kinds of bad things of all kinds of countries that we shouldn't be doing.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. And I think that migration to the U.S. Becomes essentially a survival valve, right? Because I mean, it's not just poverty which motivates people to migrate, but it's the lack of physical safety, which a lot of people in the Central American states are experiencing, and that's why they want to come to the U.S. So
yeah, but my point is, it's not just the Central American states, though, right? It's they're the ones that are connected to us by a land bridge, so they can walk to the border. But there are people in like I keep going back to Africa because that's where absolute poverty exists, and I mean just turn on YouTube and start Googling African genocide. I
well,
mean,
the
it's not
African
like a long time ago,
yeah, I
you
mean, the
know.
African path to migration is usually Europe, right? Because they'll be trying to go up
If
to
it
the
exists at all, if it
yeah,
exists at all, because they have a huge population. I mean, what are we talking about? Like 1,000th of like 1% actually can get out. They just die there, and they die a horrible death from disease and famine and starvation, and nobody talks about it. And I'm not saying that like I just want to point it out like we have these realities and these narratives that everybody follows like religiously, and they're not actually real. We don't. The only thing that's real is what you're focusing in on, right? Like you got your things that you care about because it's what your the circles or the academics are talking about. But there's all these other things that are equally as bad that get no attention, and I think it's crazy. That's all.
yeah, but then we have to, go back to the Trump administration philosophy, which is to say that the United States should become isolationist and does not carry direct responsibility over what's happening elsewhere in the world. Now, I mean, when it comes to wars, I think
I don't think he's ever said that we should be isolationists. I think that what he said is that we shouldn't be giving away all our money and resources when there's people in this country that don't have a job and are hungry. And I think that most Americans, especially the ones that are hungry and don't have a job, would probably agree with that.
right, but that's how you define isolationism, though, right? It's about like you're gonna take care of your own people first, and
No, no, okay. So
what
if
what
you
happens elsewhere, come what may, right? So all the stuff that you talked about with whatever the gang violence in Central America or the civil wars in sub-Saharan Africa or whatever, all these things all of a sudden don't matter to the U.S. Um,
Well, they should matter, and we should deal with them equally, like in a line. Just like immigration. Like you shouldn't get privileged immigration just because you're our neighbor. There should be an immigration system that works for everybody equally, and it shouldn't matter if you're right next to us or on the other side. I mean,
yeah, but
just
the
because
land border
you're
is an
right
important
next to
part of
us,
it.
why does that mean? I mean, I'm just saying realistically, because we take more Mexicans than like in Guatemalans than anyone else. I mean, legally or illegally. I mean, my whole neighborhood is Guatemalans. But it's not all people from Africa, from the Congo, or I mean,
Yeah, because
I'm just,
it
I'm
shares a land border with the United States. Yeah, of course. I mean that's. But I mean, it's the same thing with like you know the Middle Easterners and the Africans who are going to Europe, right? I mean, like they wouldn't be swimming over the Atlantic to come to the U.S., right? So I mean, of course, the physical proximity, the sharing land borders, I think they are an important piece of the puzzle for sure. Um,
But is America's current immigration lower than it has been in the past? I don't think so.
no, so if you look at the number of green cards issued, I think we're still a country of immigration for sure.
Okay.
Um,
So what are we talking about?
yeah, I mean, so it's about like sending the wrong signals to certain groups, right? I mean, creating a
Okay.
lot of
The
insecurity. I mean,
the
among
reason why the Democrats are having a hard time right now is because they're not sending the right signals, right? And this is what I was trying to talk about. It's not that people are racist. It's not that they're sexist. It's that they're suffering in America, in the richest country in the world. They're suffering, right? And it's not Donald Trump's fault. Okay, it's the establishment, the politicians, all the backdoor dealing that has put us in this position. Americans provide half of the world's charity. Okay, it's like over 50%. Not from the government, from like the private sector, comes from Americans. Americans are by and large the most generous people in the world. Okay, a lot of it comes from religious organizations, by the way, right? But also look at our government foreign policy, the amount of money that we dish out to countries. It's in the order of hundreds of millions, if not billions. There's a list of them, which is foreign aid, food aid, foreign aid, food aid. Okay, so Americans give a lot, right? All we're asking is that we're not starving. Because right now, there's people that are starving. Even in Trump's economy before COVID, there's still people starving. Okay. And
yeah.
they don't understand, why are we giving away all our money? Why are we doing this? Why are we have all these wars when I can't even get a job?
Okay, let's look at domestic policy, right? Okay, so the main Trump achievement, as you remember, 2017, it's a job cut. No, sorry, Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, I think it was called. And an important piece of the provision was that taxes would come down. That's across the board. So for lower, well, actually for lower income there wasn't that much. But okay, so but there was a tax cut across the board, and um, and then of course there were business deregulations, especially on the environment, which I think is a big mistake because we're facing disaster, climate change. I mean, I don't think that we should be spewing more waste material into the atmosphere. But and it also like you know the tax cuts. I mean, of course they're nice to some extent. I mean, we have lower unemployment rate before COVID, so I'll give that to Trump. Um, but I think that you know the direction for you know you could say the lower half of the income distribution um, still wasn't good enough. I mean, like you're not necessarily you're not returning a lot of manufacturing jobs back into the country. That's what he was campaigning on, right? Bringing the jobs back. Okay, the first 2 years it was pretty okay, and then we had a stagnation of jobs in the early 2019 in the manufacturing sector. So, all the hopes that and dreams that people put upon Trump were not being realized. If you look at the, number of voters or share of voters with less than $50,000 a year, so the poor voters, actually declined by a couple of percentage points. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it actually declined. So, in fact, what a lot of lower income people in the United States are saying is that Trump didn't give me anything or didn't give me much over the past 4 years. He didn't restore my dignity, which is what he promised when he was attacking the political swamp in Washington, right? Um,
Yeah.
so I don't. So it's definitely clear that Trump wasn't doing enough or much at all to then.
I don't know about all that. It comes down to the question: who's responsible for the economic numbers, right? Is it something that Obama and the Democrats started, or did it start under Trump? Because things were getting better for almost every demographic. I mean, if you live in a city and your factory went overseas and it's just not like economically sound for that company to come back, even with tax cuts, it's not going to happen. So that city needs to figure out a new way to make money, or they need to move away from that area. I don't know. I don't know how to solve that problem. Um, but for one man to reverse the economic decline that happened over 40 years or 60 years in 3 years, that doesn't look realistic to me. Um,
Yeah, but
so
at least don't
the
make it
question
worse.
is, huh?
Well, at least don't make it worse. I mean, like, okay, let's take a look at, why is it manufacturing not doing so well with employment numbers? Well, part of it has to do with automation, so that's nothing to do with government policy.
Yeah,
But
but Detroit had
uh,
its biggest like they made more cars last year than like I don't know the exact numbers, but I know it was surprising to people that the
well,
automobile industry was doing so well.
well,
And GDP is high.
I think one issue has to do with the tariff war with China, where basically Trump's reasoning was that regardless of how many counter tariffs that the Chinese are imposing on American goods, it cannot harm the U.S. because of the trade deficit, right? Because it would always
But it's
harm.
probably what you're saying publicly. In reality, it's going to harm us, but it's something that we have to win unless we just want to give it all back to China, because that only leaves us a service-based economy. If America's not making anything, I don't believe in isolationism, but it would be better to be completely isolated and make all of our own stuff, because at least there would be an economy where people could go get a job, than just to let China make everything and sell it to us. That doesn't make sense.
But you do agree that tariffs are a form of tax increase on the American consumers.
Yeah, I guess you could put it that way.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, because if you're paying more money for the stuff that you use every day, I mean, that's a tax increase, right? Um,
yeah,
I mean, and
but
that
you do believe that it's necessary to fight back losing our entire manufacturing base to other countries, right?
well,
I mean, America has to make things, right? Or we don't.
it's so actually, so I mean, if you look at the number, like so the manufacturing output of the U.S. in terms of value added, I think the U.S. is still doing pretty well. I mean, it's stagnated for the last 20 years. There's no doubt, but it's also because the demand, the consumer market is also stagnating, right? So
Yeah.
uh,
But I know
it,
you're big on robotics. Why can't we make the robotics? Why can't we have, even if there's not employees, why can't we be the ones making stuff and selling them to other countries? Why do we have to just let China do it? That doesn't make any sense, Larry. We have to be competitive with other countries.
yeah. So okay, so so there's a capitalist perspective and then there's a nationalist perspective. Of course, you're arguing the nationalist
Sorry, I've got a
perspective,
cough attack.
um, is which is very reasonable. But so the capitalist perspective is that, like, you know, if you're a business, even if you're an American incorporated business, you are going to make a profit consideration, and the profit consideration is that the Chinese government has been spending lots of money to create special economic zones, tax incentives for whatever, building factories and roads and stuff like that. So and the labor in China is just cheap. So if you're a
Yeah,
businessman,
that's not an upside. Okay.
yeah. No, I'm just analyzing it from the capitalist perspective. I mean, I'm not saying that the
Sure. I
capitalists
don't
are right.
agree with pure capitalism.
What so this is the capitalist logic. Now, what you're
Sure,
trying to
sure.
say is let's superimpose on the capitalist logic a nationalist logic by doing a tariff wall, by basically forcing American companies to invest in domestic production to sell to the domestic consumer market, right? That's the logic. That's the
We
reasoning.
should make the
But
tariffs fair. Okay, we don't have to like they can't be tipped. So because China already has an economic advantage because of their population and cheap labor, right? Even if we agree with it or not. America has an advantage because of security. They're more likely to be safe doing business in America
well,
than
that's why
doing
they
business
cooperate
in
here.
another country, right? So the tariffs and the taxes need to be maybe not 50-50 fair, but they need at least be fair enough that we can be competitive. Because if we're not competitive and we're not competitive because of politicians making backdoor deals that hurt the American people, you can't buy a cheap t-shirt from Walmart if you don't have a job. You know what I'm saying? Like it has to be fair and reasonable. That's all I'm asking. Fair and reasonable.
Yeah, there's different ways to get there with the fair and reasonable. I mean,
It
look, I mean,
hasn't been fair.
I totally get your point. I think so. My approach is the social policy solution, and I think UBI is a big pillar of that. And also, like, if people ask and scratch their head, well, how do you pay for it? Well, I mean, we just explained, how corporations become more profitable, right? This is by shipping jobs to low wage countries. So if your profits are going up, guess what? Your taxes are going to go up too. So and the U.S. government, which is one of the few countries in the world which taxes U.S. citizens on their global income, rather than just on the U.S. income. I think we should be able to get some of the money which has been generated from globalization. It should be taxed and it should be given as a way of compensation to the working class, and then you're going to create the jobs, because what do people with money do, with consumer money do, is that they buy stuff in the local market. I mean, they'll be creating jobs in that way in the domestic market, and that would be the way how you stimulate. But I wouldn't necessarily go down the route of tariff walls and diminishing global trade.
Well, I
Um,
think we were trying to get them to the point where they break. And then they'll come to the table and agree to a fair deal. Now that won't happen because Trump didn't get reelected. That's why the Chinese pumped so much money into the Democratic Party, because they didn't want Trump to get reelected, because now business is going to be open. It's all good again. They're going to get all their backdoor deals now,
well,
and
that's a
so
big question, though. I think that, so in terms of, so if you analyze U.S.-China relations, I mean, don't just think in terms of the money and the economics. I mean, you also have to think about, like, strategy and geopolitics, which means that basically the U.S. Political consensus has shifted under
hopefully,
Trump. in a way
Hopefully.
that, yeah, in a way that would be confrontational towards China, um, because the U.S. government believes, I mean, regardless of Democrat or Republican, now believes that China is an opponent on the global chessboard,
Well,
and
they are. They've openly been for a long time. They see the thing about China is they have a 50-year strategy. America thinks in terms of 4 or 8 years. We don't have any long-term plans for anything. It's really a disadvantage, actually. The Chinese are very focused on what they want to accomplish. They want to be the dominant power in the world. Okay. And why wouldn't they be want that? That's what most of the countries want. I mean, America wants it, but we're always at war with each other. Not real war, but political war. I mean, it's already started. Like the rallying cries for 2022 have started. You know, um,
yeah, I mean, there are definitely issues with democratic systems, and I mean how efficient you can work.
this
Um,
is what you don't want to happen. Okay, and this is what happened in the Soviet Union under Stalin. Okay, where you had farming cities, and they realized that if they just disconnected, if they just stopped doing business with the government, they could just farm their own land and they could barter and have a better life. And then the government showed up and said no, and they took every bit of food they had, and the penalty for not turning over the food, because all the population lived in big like cities and stuff, was death. And I know it's not going to get that extreme, but it proves a point. You don't want American cities or American states, even the small ones with smaller political power, to realize they would be better off if they weren't even part of America, because they can feed their own little populations and they can have a nice life in the country. Okay, you don't want that to happen, because people think big populations is an advantage. It's only an advantage if you're willing to go to war, but it's a disadvantage with consuming resources, and all the resources come from the country except for like technical resources like Silicon Valley and stuff like that. So UBI would be okay, except you don't want people stuck on UBI because we sold out all our jobs to other countries. Because how are we going to pay for it? You have to pay for UBI with having a robust economy that makes things and sells things. So if we had a huge manufacturing that, even if it was automated, with a high level of technical jobs, then there could be a bunch of people who didn't necessarily have to work like, high paying jobs, because we could afford tremendous social programs. We're never going to get there by selling out the American people,
yeah, but
so
I mean, so in terms of, so when it comes to the money, to pay for social programs, I think that the United States is still the biggest economy by GDP. So I don't think we have ever faced like a money problem with respect to paying for social programs, even
we
under
have
current arrangements
always had a
of
money
globalization.
problem for the last like 100 years. Not for paying with social programs. I
No,
know
no,
that's bullshit.
we
Well,
have political
we
issues
have debt.
to that. No, I
Right?
don't think we have economic challenges paying for social programs. I think we have a political problem. I mean, even
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
mention,
But
well,
we
why
have
is it
debt.
that,
It doesn't
well,
matter what the problem is. It's real. It's debt. We owe people money.
why is it that going up? I mean, it's like, do you have the 2017 tax cuts, right? And then, of course, the government didn't cut spending, right? Because because
Well,
they thought it was the easiest thing to do, right? Which
well,
is
see,
to
I
cut
have
taxes.
a theory on that, and I might be wrong because I'm not an economist. I have a 2-year degree on economics, but it's like you know very low level. But what I believe the plan was to do like a Reagan style economic program where you cut taxes, cut regulations, get the economy booming, get more people working, bring back manufacturing, and then slowly increase taxes to try to bring more revenue in. And if we could get to a surplus instead of a deficit, then we could seriously start talking about paying down some of the debt. If we were paying down the debt, there would be a lot more like political interest in increasing social programs. You know, it, I don't totally agree with the defense spending, but I do believe that we should have as much defense spending as the next biggest rival. And it's unfortunate, but just in case in 20 years from now somebody tries to invade us. Because, I mean, I know you don't think it's possible, but if you look at human history, it seems like it's inevitable.
Well, I would say that in terms of military might, I think we could slim it down substantially. I think
I
it's
think
a
you
good
could slim
idea.
it down by ending some of the bullshit wars and spending $1,000 for a hammer.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
think
like
I think we should drastically reduce the military budget, and I think we should invest in a small force, which is, however, highly mobile, highly technologized, which means that anybody who tries to attack the U.S. Can easily be sort of taken out with a very advanced army and weaponry, right? And I think that look, I mean, so I'm not an expert in the history of war, but my impression is that like a World War I, World War II kind of global warfare era is basically over, and the reason,
that
and,
is a mistake to think
no,
that way.
no, the reason why I'm saying this is because um, well, because of nuclear weapons. It's basically like anybody who has them, right, has total destruction power. I mean, the only thing that could unravel the global order is if you have a rogue state or a rogue actor, a private actor, who gets access to the nuclear codes. Um, then we're fucked. Yeah, that's true. But
Well, there's a couple of scenarios. You're not thinking creative with enough creativity. Okay, so and I'm just imagining things here. But if somebody comes up with a new technology that can disable nuclear weapons, then they could plan an assault on us, an invasion. Okay. Also, you could have a situation where a terrible disease breaks out, and we're already competing over resources somewhere down the road where resources are running scarce, and the climate people should understand this. You know, talking about water, air, minerals, basic things, right? If it ever gets to the point where they're willing to take a nuclear hit, if they think they can overcome us and take the last little bit of resources, then some countries I think would do that. You know, they would just throw their whole population at us just to win at the end. Because their life is horrible anyways. They wouldn't have anything to lose. So global security in some ways depends on climate. You know, like if we should take care of the climate, and we should have some kind of agreement with all the countries, a realistic agreement, not a BS agreement for political power or whatever. Because if we start, the most likely scenario for humans, the way we're going, is to start warring over resources. It's just a fact.
yeah, so that's absolutely true. I think so. I mean, if you add the variable of resources, I mean, water, minerals, fossil fuels, any of that. I mean, we're not actually running out of fossil fuels. In fact,
No, but we shouldn't be using them. Not even for the environment. We should be hoarding them for like space exploration and stuff. Because
well,
plastic is an amazing thing.
exactly the fear that we're experiencing is that if we add more fossil fuels to our lifestyle, we're actually going to accelerate the warming trend. I mean, it's like 2020 already is like probably going to go down as the warmest year. I mean, it's in November here in New Jersey where we have like 80 degrees right now, which is unusual for
Yeah.
us. Um, so and everywhere, I mean, you see the bad news. I mean, with like the wildfires in the west, the storms in the south.
Yeah,
Uh,
I see some of this. I think is BS, Larry. Okay, like the wildfires. There's always been fires. They have poor forest management. I know Trump says it, so nobody thinks it's true. But you have different areas in the Earth where it's got similar forests, so similar temperatures, and it's not happening. And the storms. There's no proof that there's been an increase in storms. Okay, I live in Florida. It's not true. Okay, now there could definitely be changes in weather patterns because of climate change, right? And I do think the Earth is heating, and I think it's heating because of greenhouse gases. But I think that, like coronavirus, it's been manipulated into a political narrative, and that's not good. You need to understand the truth of things so you can really fix it. I think science can fix climate change. If we could just stop fighting and get together, like that nuclear fusion reactor they're building in MIT. The only reason we can't reverse climate change is because reversing climate change would consume more energy than we can put out without causing more climate change. If you have a reactor that only uses 10% of the energy that it generates, then theoretically we could just reverse climate change by cleaning carbon and cleaning the ocean. This is real technology, you know. Science, we can innovate our ways, our we can innovate our way out of this if we could just start acting like a global community instead of being so adversarial. That's the problem. And our media and our politicians are our biggest enemy.
well, I would agree with the point that we need new technology. Fusion energy might be the one. I also agree that we
Prom-
need.
What's
I, I,
promising?
I, I agree we need global cooperation because this is a global planetary challenge. Um, I am, but in terms of the outcome, I'm somewhat more pessimistic because I don't know. I mean, because I mean, humans. I mean, we've always tried to sort of, live better and extract resources to basically make our lives more convenient. Building air conditioning or heating or whatever, nice houses and stuff. And
Air
you know,
conditioning saves lives.
yeah, and we think this is a good thing, but I mean, so far, a track record is that that it required fossil fuels to create wealth for us, and I think that this is a dead end strategy, and I think that I mean, here's the irony, like even if you stop CO2 emissions altogether, the temperature is still going to go up because it takes time for the existing levels of CO2 and methane to reduce. Um,
Well, you could have scrubbers. We have the technology to extract greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere. The only thing we don't have is a power source, because it would use more power than, so you would have to burn more greenhouse gases to power these things. So they would be putting out more CO2 than
they're
they
sucking
would
up.
be taking out, you know. I mean, you could use nuclear, but nobody wants to use nuclear. But my point is, so I'm not really against the Green New Deal. The only problem with it is it will destroy America and not save the earth. If you could have the whole world at the same time switch to the new Green New Deal, I would take it a lot more seriously. Okay. Because then at least you might be having to switch from capitalism to socialism, but at least you could say it would work, it might work. But right now they want to do this thing and use America as like the template and destroy our way of life and our economy, and it would have like no impact on the earth, because other countries wouldn't do it. If you don't have China and India at least on board, then you're not stopping climate change. So it doesn't make
So
any
on
sense.
the point of global cooperation, I think it has to happen. But I mean, but also we shouldn't be using other countries as an excuse for inaction in our own country. It's still important that we do our best to control the greenhouse emissions. But and we know that this should be the policy, but quite frankly, I mean, if you look at what the Trump administration has been doing, is pull out of the Paris Climate Accord,
Yeah,
uh,
but we
also
met
to
better numbers than they
regulate
required.
environmental stuff, right?
Yeah, but we met better numbers than they required. Like our greenhouse gas emissions are lower than what were required in the Paris Climate Accords. So
Yeah,
I
but
don't understand.
the formal act of withdrawing, I think, is sending a bad signal. I mean, in terms, I didn't look at the latest CO2 figures in the U.S., so I mean, I'm not able to judge that at all. But I think the political declaration to basically say, well, we'll go it alone and we'll do whatever the hell we want as US, I think that's a very bad signal to send to the world.
But
Uh,
no, okay. I understand what you're saying, and it would be right if the Paris Climate Accord was a real thing. Okay. But what it was a few countries have to meet certain standards, and they artificially label other countries as developing, like China and India, and they don't have to meet the standards, not at the same rate as we do. So all it does is become an economic drag on America, and then we get back to the people being hungry again. And but we get to say, "Oh, look, we're good. We're part of the that's the whole misinformation, non-reality arguments that I can't stand. Show me a deal that's really going to make a difference and I will support it. But I'm not going to be part of some bullshit deal that hurts the American people and doesn't save the earth. I can't stand that kind of
no,
stuff,
no,
man.
but it still is the case that so the U.S. doesn't produce the majority of the CO2 emissions. I think we can clarify that point. It's about 15%. Um, and but it's like but 15% is not 1%, right? I think the United States still has a lot to go in order
Oh
to
yeah,
bring
sure.
down the emissions. And I would say that the Europeans have been somewhat more aggressive even than the US, and of course
And
both.
they're burning down their cities, aren't they?
Yeah, but I don't know what you refer to here, but
The
both continents are.
popularity of the
Sorry,
tax rates in Germany and France. Aren't
I
there
mean,
governments on the rocks because the people are so unhappy?
yeah, there are certainly issues with the economy and with jobs as we do here. I mean, but I mean, look, a big part of it of of the malaise that Western countries are facing. Is so it's not just that we still put out a lot of emissions, less than we did in the 1990s, but still, a lot of emissions. Number one, and number two is that we're not taking care of people, as you say, right? I mean, like there's not enough jobs, and then even the jobs that we have is poorly paid. So so we have a cocktail in the developed countries, which is a very bad foreboding. But I mean, but I guess your point being that like we have to cooperate together. I mean, the developing and the developed countries
Well,
have to work together, and I think I agree with that totally. I
well,
think we
first of all, we have to start with a place of reality. Okay. In America and in a lot of other countries, I think almost all the countries except Africa, I always refer to back to Africa, and I mean the whole continent, is that the lifespan has increased from 40 years to 80 years, right? Poverty and starvation, diseases has all gone down, right? Uh, for like hundreds of years, if not thousands, people lived on $2 a day, right? That was like what it cost to like the average for somebody to survive. $2 a day. Some people was like 25 cents, and then the rich people are probably $5, but the average was $2. Now the average is $120, right? It's going to be by the end of the century $175 per person, right? And they expect even the people in Africa, if we keep going along these trends, those people will be out of absolute poverty and maybe even have air conditioning. You brought up air conditioning. I'm not trying to make a joke, but they expect everybody in Africa, the poorest countries in the world, to have a similar standard of life as long as we don't, blow up the world. So, as far as quality of life for all human beings, it's increased in almost every respect.
But it
Now,
requires the burning of fossil fuels, correct?
yeah, well, I mean, so the solution to fossil fuels is we need to tone it down. We need to not use coal. Coal is really bad. We should probably focus in on nuclear and natural gas and all the like wind and solar, all the things that we can do to try to bring down fossil fuel use on the grid. And we should use this time, the little bit of time that we have left, to innovate, to find the technology, the nuclear fusion reactor or the like, in any, because we can do this. We have geniuses, right? We need to invest in these technologies and find the solution before we run out of time, But if we can't just abandon fossil fuels altogether, because then you'll have people start to die. If you just got rid of air conditioning, then people would start to die all over America. You can't do that unless you're willing to sacrifice people. And in a democracy, that's not going to go well.
Okay,
Okay.
so I agree with your point that we are facing a dilemma between environment and economics, and I acknowledge the dilemma. Like, I'm not saying that Larry Lou wants to make everybody ride donkeys and be primitive. So I'm not I'm certainly not pushing in that direction. I mean, maybe I've made a
Well,
few.
it's just not a real narrative that life is worse now for people than it has been in the past. That is just a fiction. It's not anywhere
No,
grounded
no,
in reality.
objectively, we're better off. Well, like,
By
but
far.
look, so right, exactly. But the point that has to be made is about sustainability, because we want to make sure that it's not just like baby boomers, Gen X, and maybe the early millennials who can still benefit from this.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
we want to make sure that future generations, are still going to be able to enjoy the planet, and
Well, yeah.
and we can't be doing it if we're burning the fossil fuels. So,
Well,
um,
what I'm worried about is that we figure out how to fix climate change, but there's such a disparity in class that the rich elite people are on a completely different level. Like there's this a cartoon, it's called Alita Battle Angel, and the majority of people live on the earth, and then the rich elite live in this city in the sky where everything is like paradise. And the people on the bottom, they don't ever even get to see it. They're never allowed to go there. They work every single day, and then they get paid like little tokens, and they send the resources they extract up into the cities in the sky. And I know it sounds crazy, but when I see people like these tech, like the amount of money that they are making, I mean, I'm not for stripping the rich of their money, but they have so much. How could they expect to have that much money and not give any of it back? It really kind of blows my mind. And if you let those people control everything, it's not far fetched in a couple hundred years for there to be an insurmountable disparity between poor people and rich people, where it will not be possible to get from one to the other. And that's what I don't want to happen.
oh, I understand completely, and I agree with that sentiment. I think, I mean, if you look at the stocks of Amazon and Facebook and whatever, I mean, it's been going through the roof. I mean, especially since the start of the pandemic. These has been like this has been like an underlying trend we see in our economy. It's much more of an information-driven economy rather than pure physical resources. And those who control the information flows, basically the companies in Silicon Valley and nearby, they are going to be making almost all the money in society. And I think I mean, just by stating that, I think it strengthens the point of people like me, who have been saying that we need more social policy, we need basic income, we need Medicare for all. We need housing policies that are more amenable to
Well,
afford rent and stuff.
it's something very interesting is happening right now with the parties. Um, Fox News, it was like on the five, right? They were doing exit polls from Republican voters. And it was something like 72 or 75% of Republican voters that they polled said that they support Medicare for all. Um, it was something like 65% believed there was a problem with racism in America. There was another one that was really fascinating. Another statistic that you wouldn't think. Um, so I think that the parties are changing where because you have a lot of working class people who identify as Republicans, not necessarily conservatives, and they understand that, oh, it was minimum wage. A lot of Republicans support high minimum wage now. It's because it directly affects their life. Like I think that if Trump or or Joe Biden, either one of them would have came out for Medicare for all, I think they would have won in a landslide. Neither one of them won in a landslide. I mean, I know Trump or Biden got like 3 million more votes, but not technically a landslide according to the Electoral College. But I don't want to get into that one. But my point is that the Republican Party is changing. It's not like all for rich people anymore. There's a lot of people who will support sensible policies.
Well,
The
so
Medicare for all, it's a
okay,
big one.
well, so the Republican Party is a big tent party, just like the Democrat, and so um, I mean, I have to judge the Republican Party on the federal level in terms of what they did
Well, those are the
in the
same
last
guys that have been here forever.
4 years, and I
We
mean,
got to
and
get rid of those guys.
right. So if you look at the Paul Ryan people, who were responsible for the 2017 tax cuts, um, and like those guys are oligarchs, right? I mean, just in terms of like if you analyze the policies that they implemented, these are oligarchic policies, and they're not necessarily good for the little guys. And I just give you the statistics with the below 50K earners who are voting against Trump and against GOP. So I mean, but I think the important point would be that like GOP can be populist, but you need the leader, right? I mean, if
Yeah,
as you say, if
it's
Tulsi Gabbard were to switch to the GOP and she kept the same speech, right? I mean, like she doesn't hire any of these
she doesn't have
GOP
to change
strategists.
anything.
Yeah, exactly. So I think if that were to happen, I think that there would be a chance for GOP to retake the White House
Well,
and to do maybe some populist policies. I'm not sure.
regardless whether or not Tulsi runs, the fact that she was basically the second most popular candidate with Republicans and independents, other than Donald Trump, just shows you the direction that the party can go. I mean, Trump's platform, they talk about, is it transferable to a new GOP candidate? Well, it's definitely, his base is totally transferable to Tulsi Gabbard. I have like the biggest redneck cousins that they you if you've seen them, you would think they're racist, but I know they're not racist. They're just like American hillbillies, man, and they love her. I mean, it's crazy how much they love Tulsi Gabbard, and I'm like, she's a Democrat, right? They don't care that she's a Democrat. They just like the way she talks. They like what she says. They don't want to be involved in any wars. No wars, right? And she's not a complete socialist. She wants to just to tamper
No,
down the wars. And
if you listen to her policies, I mean, she's for Medicare for all. She's for
yeah,
UBI. There's a bunch of issues. I mean, I would put her in the progressive column very solidly, but like,
well,
but she's
yeah,
not. But she's not like a piss off like Bernie Sanders, right? Or Elizabeth Warren,
Well,
right?
so there's a lot of problems with Bernie Sanders, but Tulsi, she doesn't say she's a socialist, so that's a big plus. Even if you are a socialist, you shouldn't say it because that's like saying it's almost as bad as saying you're a Nazi to most Americans, and that's what Bernie Sanders doesn't understand. And I know that what you think a socialist is, and what Bernie Sanders thinks a socialist is not what other people think a socialist is. Because Americans have been raised. Just look at 80s movies, for God's sakes. I mean,
Yeah.
every bad guy is a socialist.
Okay, okay, I get that point, but I think it's important to distinguish between policy and label, right? So you would agree that in terms of policy, Tulsi and Bernie are aligned on a lot of points, right? But then in terms of
Yeah,
the
but
label, obviously they're different, right? So the self-labeling is
sure, but
different, but they're
elections
aligned
are
on policies.
decided by people that don't know anything about policy. They are. Elections are decided by low income voters or low information voters on both sides. That's how it breaks.
Yeah,
Whoever can get
I
the
understand.
most
Yeah,
people
but
that
look. I mean, you're talking to like myself, which is I love studying policy and reading newspapers, etc. So
sure. But
to
Tulsi's
me,
real smart never to cross that road though. Like she supported Sanders, but she's never said she's a socialist. And she's for free education, but she wants to pay for it by getting rid of all the military waste, all the waste spending. And see, I think you're right. I don't know about making a smaller army, right? But you don't even have to do that. All you have to do is not have continuous wars. And okay, so tax money goes to these military contractors, and they sell us hammers. And it's a crude analogy, but they literally sell us a hammer for say like $75, right? It should, since we're buying so many hammers, we should be we should getting a rate
you
that's
could buy
less
them
than
on the
like,
open market, right? You don't just have to buy them from certain contractors, right?
yeah, we should be getting a deal, but we're spending like, like 50 times the cost. And that's just for like a hammer. When you start talking about like tanks and planes and specialized like computer chips, and I mean, we're paying out the wazoo for things. We should be negotiating much better rates. And I think that was one of the big things that Trump talked about in the beginning. I remember him talking about like, how he said, I'm not paying that much for these planes. I'm only going to pay this. And it was like 3 times less. And
Well,
of
the
course,
military
they're going to
budget
agree.
increased under Trump, right?
Oh, it did increase. Yeah, no, you're right. It did. It did increase. Just like the debt. My biggest problem with Trump, probably my biggest problem, even more so than his language, was the debt and the deficit. I can't stand that, man. We are never going to, nothing will ever get better. All these social programs we're talking about, we will never get them if we can't at least have a surplus. Maybe we can't pay down the whole debt, but we need to go into surplus, and we need to put together a real 50 or 100-year plan to pay down this debt. It's not right. No household can run on a debt like this. Okay? I mean, just it's like it's not even economics. It's like home ec that you learn in middle school. Okay?
Well, and so the U.S. is in a unique position because like if we're a country like Argentina, I mean, if you follow in the news, I mean, they basically have a debt crisis every year, right?
Yeah.
And but the reason why the United States is not Argentina is because when people buy stuff, and when I say people, I mean like all over the world, really, like Europeans, Japanese, even the Chinese. Like if they buy stuff, they use the greenback, right?
Yeah,
Now,
using American.
exactly. So there's a slight move away from it because the Chinese are trying to set up their own global power and trade regime, but the United States is still the number one reserve currency in the world, and I think as long as it
Yeah,
happens, like basically we keep printing money, and the dollar's still strong, right? So,
yeah, but
uh,
that's a risky game. And you know what? That could be. what the trade war was really about was to try to hurt China so they can't overtake us and become the world's currency. I mean, it's a conspiracy theory, but
It's a reasonable assumption. It's a reasonable assumption to make for sure. Um,
yeah.
so let's so on the last point before I let you go, I think we should say a few things about the Biden-Harris administration and give us a few pointers as to what you think we should expect in the next 2 to 4 years.
Okay, well, so I've been thinking a lot about this the last few days, and I'm actually pretty happy with the way things are. I um I know you want to talk about what they're going to do, but as far as the election, I don't think it was stolen. Not in a way of stealing votes, media manipulation, whatever. That's part of the game now, right? But I think that the American people they're tired of Trump, and I think a lot of people voted against Trump, and then they voted down ballot for Republicans because they're also tired of a lot of Democrats. They're tired of just the fighting between Trump and the Democrats. They're tired of a lot of the woke policies, the cancel culture. I really do believe that. And like people like Mitch McConnell, like I don't like Mitch McConnell, and he was definitely to blame for some of the stimulus negotiations not going through, but it did not fall on him. It fell on Trump and Nancy Pelosi. And that's what most people saw, those two fighting. When Nancy Pelosi said she hadn't talked to Trump in a year, she wasn't lying. She's like, I don't talk to him. And I think that America needed to move on. We needed hopefully our politicians will get the message that we're tired of the fighting. We're tired of America looking like a bunch of idiots, that can't get nothing done. Nothing has been done the last 2 years. You know, um, the
And
Biden
that's what we
Harris
should expect.
administration. Go ahead.
That's what we should expect for the next few years as well, if the GOP
Well,
maintains the Senate.
so that brings us to the next problem. The problem is that because of the way that it all happened, and Trump's not making it any better, but he's not wrong. The media is his enemy. Everything that he's done right, they ignored, and everything he's done wrong, they would not stop talking about. So I can hardly blame him for being this way, right? I'm hoping that he will concede and that he will just say, listen, they might have stole some votes, but they didn't steal enough to make a difference. So good luck, Joe and Harris. Now, I think that it would be possible maybe for Joe Biden to work with the Senate Republicans. Joe Biden's a Republican. he's, he's not in any sense a liberal. I mean, he's a deep stater, just like the rest of them. So him and Mitch McConnell probably go golfing together or something. Who knows? But anyways,
Yeah.
if Trump was smart, and I think he's smart in some ways and stupid in other ways, I think that he should concede and he should ask for a stimulus package. That would be my dream. That he said, you know what, I'm going to concede. Good luck, Joe Biden and Kamala, Kamala Harris,
Yeah.
and let's please pass a stimulus package because we need it now. We need it right now. But he probably won't do that. Um, But I don't think that the Democrats, the progressives, I don't think they're going to let him work with the Republicans. Tell you the truth, I think that the Democrats have been on a verge of an internal civil war for a while now. And I think that Biden is a weak president. He's a weak person and he won by thin margins. So he doesn't have a lot of political power. He does they lost seats in the House. He didn't lose. I mean, he didn't they're probably not going to take the Senate. And they got creamed in state legislative chairs. And it's a redistricting year. People are mad. The Democrats are hurt right now. And they're pointing fingers. They're pointing fingers at Nancy Pelosi. They're pointing fingers at the progressives. The progressives are saying, we need a more progressive candidate. And the old fashioned liberals are saying, oh my God, your progressive policies are why we're losing elections. Don't ever say socialism again. Don't say it. Stop saying defund the police. So now you have this finger pointing, and I really think that the Republicans, all they have to do is sit back and let the Democrats fight each other and let America see it, and they're gonna be in a bad place in the next two elections if they don't straighten out. They need a coherent message of what their party stands for. They do.
Yeah,
They should have like a conference.
I think the important piece of the puzzle is the Senate majority and who gets it. Because so here's a bad case scenario for the Democrats, which is that you're gonna have divided House, right? Mitch McConnell stays as a majority leader, and he has no incentive whatsoever to give the Democrats any win, which means that we're gonna have gridlock for 2 years until the midterms. And then, of course, the GOP is going to blame the Democrats for not doing anything. And the Democrats are going to lose the House as well as the Senate. And then we have 2 more years of that. So we basically have like a lame duck president, Biden, when he gets in. So
Yeah.
that's the thing. So that's why I think the best thing, that should be happening, right? And I'm not saying it's going to happen, but that should be happening is, let's assume in the positive case scenario for the Democrats that they're going to get the Senate majority. In that case, and also, I'm not sure whether they got rid of the filibuster, but I think it's certainly a lot harder to do filibuster nowadays. So let's say that Democrats have no excuse for being lazy on legislation. They should enact an agenda. They should be doing at least like a big stimulus package, right? That's the very least. They should,
Like now. Why isn't
yeah.
Joe Biden talking about it right now? I cannot believe it. He needs political like will. I just don't understand who's his advisor. Like, if I would be like, okay, Joe, you want to win the American people? Go give a speech, talk about a big stimulus package. Not just one stimulus check, like 3 months or 6 months or something, like everything. Just go for it. Let Mitch McConnell say no. If you want to defeat him in 2022, let him say no. You know, it's I don't know. It's like they're not even trying.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I mean, he just gave his announcement speech yesterday, so I think,
It should have included a stimulus package.
well, yeah, he's a little bit overwhelmed with emotions. I think he's whatever, the Scranton working class kid, and now he gets to sit inside the Oval Office and not just as a vice president. So
I
um,
don't know.
so
Well, it doesn't look good for for Democrats. North
yeah,
Carolina is going for the Republicans. They're going to get one seat from Georgia, and they're going to get Alaska. Those are the three they need to have 51. So it right now, I've been looking every day. It doesn't look like the Democrats are going to get the House.
well, Alaska is definitely going to be Republican. Then and North Carolina and the two Georgia seats, I think those are the ones that are
One of
on
the
this.
Georgia seats look like it's flipped to Democrat.
So it's going to be what, 49-51 Republican?
Yeah, 49-51. And and that paints a picture of the country right now, by the way. If you look at on the federal level, you had Democrats lose seats and Republicans pick up seats, so it's closer down the middle. Then you have a possible Senate, which is 49-51, right down the middle. And then you have Joe Biden, who, he might have like 20 or 30 more electoral college votes, but if you look at the margins in the states, they're all right down the middle. I mean, he's got his blue and Trump had his red, but the ones that were swings, I mean, you're talking about like 2, 6, 10,000 votes in some of these states. So you have right now a completely divided nation. It
Yeah.
sucks. It's not good.
Yeah. I mean, but I mean, then you go back to the framers and they said, well, actually, we want to have a divided and weak government because strong
Can't
government
do
just
anything.
messes things up. Yeah. Uh, and I mean, like if I was sort of the framer, right? So if I was the sort of all-knowing dictator, so to speak, who could develop the constitution. I mean, I would prefer a parliamentary system, right, where you basically because right now, I mean, we have two houses in Congress, right, and then you have the presidency, right. So you have three institutions that each have their own like internal logic, right, and they work independent from each other. Um, and I don't think that's good. I mean, because in the parliamentary system, at least like you can't blame like the other branch of government for not being effective in terms of policy, right? Uh,
Well, I don't know. It depends. So, unfortunately, we're not gonna know if the founding fathers were geniuses or idiots until either we persist and continue or we fail. Like who's to say that America won't last 500 or 1,000 years? And it might be because of our system. Or if we fall apart next year, then maybe it wasn't such a good idea. But they were very smart people, smarter than I am, and they made it like this on purpose. You know,
yeah, I mean, if you say, well, we as a nation, will we survive? On that point, I'm more optimistic. I think, like the things that we have to worry about are external events, which is to say, as you like all the stuff that you mentioned earlier, climate change and the nuclear war and stuff like that. But internally, I think we'll be able to make it. I mean, I don't think that we are in the civil path trajectory, and I also don't think that it's going to be helpful to the discourse if we sort of paint a civil war picture on the wall, right?
I don't think there's any chance of a civil war unless the Democrats try to do something stupid like get rid of the electoral college.
No,
And
I think look, I mean, so right now, I mean, there's the National Vote Compact, and it has about 35% of the electoral votes together, and they need to have 51% in order for the compact to be realized. At which point, the electoral college is de facto abolished, right? Because what the National Vote Compact is saying is that all of the electoral votes will go to the national popular vote winner, right? Which is basically a way to.
yeah, and that's just the type of dirty policies that day-to-day Americans don't like. I think that kind of talk is why they lost so many state legislators. If you look at the state legislative map right now, it's all red with just little blue dots every here and there. And you know what's really funny about that is so every 10 years they get to redraw the congressional map, and that's where gerrymandering happens, right? The Republicans are already threatening to gerrymander AOC out of her out of her area.
I don't think that's going to work well because
I just think it's funny.
because the seat is in, I think, in the Bronx and in Queens.
No,
So
I know, but they could hurt her, or at least they're saying they could. But the point is that if there's any election and Nancy Pelosi, I remember her saying this. She was saying we need to hang on to these legislative chairs, and they lost all. They didn't win one. They won 0 out of 100. It's
yeah,
catastrophic for
so
them.
basically, I mean, I think we discussed this in our chat, which is that there's a discrepancy between the Biden voters and then you could say legislative votes.
Yeah, people they made two decisions. If you really analyze what happened in this election, a lot of people, the votes that mattered at the end of the day, they voted against Trump and then they voted against Democrats. And once I realized that, I made peace with this election. And tell you the truth, it kind of feels good. Like
I
I'm
don't know what feels good about it because if the Republicans are controlling it, right, which means that they're able to stymie the Biden agenda, and then we have to ask ourselves, well, what is the Biden agenda? I mean, it's not
well,
Medicare for all,
he's
but it's
never told you. You guys elected him without asking him.
Well, it's about it's about expanding, insurance coverage. It's about raising the minimum wage. It's about, creating an infrastructure program. It's about, restoring environmental protection. So, I mean, I think there's a bunch of things that would be very positive. So I don't know why the American people should be celebrating Republican legislative victories. I
because
think
of
it's going to be bad for the country because, we're not going to see, because you're going to see more gridlock.
it's because of critical race theory and the Proposition 16, which was going to take out constitutional protections for discrimination. It was going to allow the California government to discriminate. Now in California, it's like blue or D plus 28 or something. I don't know. It's high up there. It's like the most democratic place you can be. They overwhelmingly rejected it. So the I don't know who are they making these policies for? Late term abortion. Democrats are not down with that. Only a few people in power think that Democrats are down with that. Late term, some religious Democrats will accept abortion. They won't accept a late term abortion. That's crazy.
Yeah,
You know, it's
I'm actually abortion.
incompatible. It's incompatible with normal people. And critical race theory is a horrible philosophy. We want people in America to integrate together, right? I was making this point with somebody, and it took me 2 seconds to Google interracial relationships, marriages, right? In 1970, it was like 1,000, and then in 1980, it was 10,000. Right now, it's like 3 million interracial marriages in America. It's doubling and tripling every 10 years. In the next 100 years, the majority of Americans will be the product of interracial families.
Which
Okay.
basically means there will be more, interracial, interethnic population, right?
And that's not even counting friends. That's just legal marriages. Like when you look at a kid walking down the street and he's obviously mixed with white, black, or white and Spanish or Asian, whatever combination, that kid is distinctly American, right? The problem isn't racism. I mean, racism is definitely a problem, but it's not the problem. The problem is tribalism and it's class war.
Well, so racism is a subcategory of tribalism, right? Because so race is like a tribe, basically. It's like I say I have this color, and then these people have that color, and then we're supposed to be enemies. That sort of. I mean, so it's a subcategory inside of tribalism. So I mean, I wouldn't separate them logically, at least.
No, no, you can have tribalism in the same neighborhood. You have the guys on one street, they're a tribe, and they're fighting with the guys on the other street. They're a tribe, right? You have in America, you have all these different tribes, and you have ever expanding tribes. Like the ultimate tribes are the Democrats and the Republicans, but there's all kinds of tribes, right? But like you'll hear like I know somebody personally who's Cuban, and he will say all kinds of derogatory terms inside his house about other races. But then when he gets out into the world, he's like friends with blacks and whites. I mean, racism exists on different levels, but tribalism is worse because it teaches people it's like the new racism. It's like once there's only one color, like if America exists 500 years from now, everybody's going to be brown. Okay, people are still going to be tribal. They're still going to be warring, and the ultimate war will be from the rich and the poor. And I think that media, see, you can't fix a problem if you don't know what the real problem is. You know, the
Well,
problem isn't racism.
so that's also what the Bernie Sanders argument has been, which is that regardless of your racial or gender or whatever other factors there are, I think the most important thing that the American people should pay attention to is that it is a class conflict. I mean, essentially the 1% against the 99%. I mean, the whole talk that he has had for the last decades, really.
Yeah,
I mean, so I agree broadly with that. I think that we should be able to uh, you know set aside some of the other differences as long as we can work together on class issues.
sure.
But I mean, like, but I wouldn't like I also wouldn't dismiss completely like some of the concerns about race.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I understand what you're saying,
like
and I acknowledge. Go ahead. Sorry.
yeah. So I mean, if you're like a black resident and you don't want to be automatically suspected by a cop, and then if you are being suspected by a cop, you don't want to be tasered unjustly or shot, right?
Sure, sure. And
I
that's true.
yeah,
Like,
that's
it would
legitimate.
be ridiculous to tell a black person that racism doesn't exist, and I would never do that. But what I'm talking about specifically is the Democrats' argument. It comes from the Democrats and it comes from the media trying to say that everybody who voted for Trump is racist. Now, what that does is it makes conservatives or whoever voted for Trump more tribal. Okay? And it's galvanizing them against the Democrats. It's like an escalation, right? So you have one problem, which is a level of racism, and then you get so much animosity towards people who might not even be the cause of the problem, and then they get angry back at you, and it becomes this escalation on both sides. And I think that's what's hurting. That's what I think is hurting the Democrats. I mean, I don't know any white person who would say they don't think that racism is even real. That's insane. Everybody has met some kind of guy who's kind of racist. I mean, I have. I probably see them all every day, and they're not even all white. Like it's
Yeah,
racist. Everybody's racist on some level. I mean, I try. I think a lot of white people actually really try not to be racist. And then they're told by some progressives that means that you are racist. I was like, I'm trying to consciously not be racist. So that means that I am racist? Please stop it.
yeah. I think there, like that kind of talk has gone too far. I agree with that, and also with the Trump voters. I mean, one thing that people should pay attention to, I mean, is that Trump increased the vote by 7 million voters, right? And of course, the
Yeah.
reason why he
Yeah.
lost is because the Democrats got, like 9 million or so, right? So,
Yeah, they increased it by 9 million.
yeah,
Now,
but it's important to say that, like, the Trump base has grown and is grown for whatever the reason was. So, I mean, if you say it was critical race theory for, you
it's a
know,
combination of things.
for other
You know,
people, it might be that, like, they think that, the
defund the
Democrats have really
police.
fell out, uh, police or whatever. I mean, for whatever reason, that we of course have to analyze sociologically, there is a substantial Trump base, and we do have to understand it. And
Well, let me ask you this question before you go. Okay, you have the most people who ever voted, right, on both sides. You know, you got the Republicans or the Trump supporters that feel like they've really been it's been stolen from them. Either they think that it's legitimately been like someone stole votes, or they think that the media didn't treat Trump fair, which is what I think. And those people, I believe, are much more likely to show up at a bitterness in 2022 than the Democrats, because they're not going to have Trump on the ballot to rally all these people. It's going to be a midterm election. Democrats historically don't really show up for midterms, even though they did in 2018. They did, but if there's a red wave in 2022, I think that the Democrats, it could be a death blow for them. And I think that's why they're freaking out right now. They're like, we have got to change. And instead of trying to figure out what the problem is, they're like pointing fingers at each other. They're saying, no, it's because you guys are too progressive. And the other side's like, no, it's because we're not progressive enough. They have a real problem.
Oh yeah, I share that analysis completely. I think there's going to be an issue with mobilization now that Trump is out of the window. And I don't know, the American democracy experiment remains interesting. That's I think that's a good note to end on, unless you have another. Uh,
No, I probably need to finish cooking and stuff, but it's really interesting. I actually kind of am more excited with seeing the Biden Harris administration than I am of seeing Trump. Tell you the truth, I think it's going to be crazy.
well, I mean, for me, it was just a pure relief that I mean, like, I understand that, like, to be controversial, narcissist like Trump, and I know that some people are very positively animated to that, but for me, it's just like I, I want to have a president who has boring tweets. Like I want to have somebody who just like at least like doesn't throw more Molotov cocktails
Yeah,
in
we need a real leader.
political
That's what we
situation.
don't have.
Yeah, it's like we need a real leader. I mean, as you say, I mean, sorry, Biden is, Harris. They're part of the political swamp in Washington, and I mean, so I share the whole like progressive like disappointment, right? Um, but at least the craziness will stop for just a little bit, maybe just 1 or 2 years.
I think Biden's going to step down. I do. Like Nancy had that 25th Amendment conference, and when she was saying that, she was outlining the procedures to remove a president if he stepped down or if he had to be removed through incapacitation. And when I was listening to it, and I was like, she's not talking about Trump, man. She's talking about Biden. I think that Biden will be president for probably 6 months, and he will voluntarily step down. And then Kamala Harris will be the president, and nobody voted for her, not even Democrats. She's not popular with the Democrats. And she's flaky enough where, in some ways, you think she's a swamp neoliberal. In other ways, she talks about the most progressive, crazy things that you've ever heard, like equality of outcome, which is like pure Marxism. She had an animated short she released like a week ago. It was craziest thing. Like it scares the death out of people who don't like socialists.
No, I mean,
So
the way how I judge Kamala is Harris is to look at the record as Attorney General, because that's when you make decisions. And I think she was pretty much right of center, right? It's about criminalizing people for
sure,
taking drugs and stuff like that. And
yeah,
because she
a lot of
wanted to
people
be,
jail.
yeah, because she wanted to be taken seriously by you could say white middle class voters, and so I think she's very willing to bend in whatever ways that the donors are telling her to bend.
She's an
And
opportunist.
yeah, and she doesn't have the, like, if you listen to Tulsi or Bernie or Andrew Yang or the Massachusetts senator, what's her name, Warren. I mean, you can tell that like they're very serious in what they're saying, right? Like they really believe in the shit that they're talking about.
Yeah,
But I didn't have that impression with Harris and Buttigieg and Klobuchar and Biden and people like that. So uh,
Harris is the least likable one. She's not likable. I think that even people in her own party are going to start to hate her. She just something about the pitch of her voice and her mannerisms. And I mean, to me, I think it's a wonder that she's made it so far in politics without even becoming the vice president or maybe the president. I think really she could end up being a disaster. You know, just because, like, even if she tries her best, just her personality and the way she's got the power and how divided the country is. You know how much Republicans hated Obama? I, Obama was a very popular president. He won by a landslide, especially the first time. And Harris is not going to have that. And I skip over Biden because I don't think he's going to stay. I don't think he was ever planning on staying. I think his sole accomplishment will be
To
defeating
defeat
Donald
Trump.
Trump.
Yeah.
And he did it. He was president and he can sit back and hopefully he doesn't die. I mean, God, what a tragic, like, think about how bad it would be for the country if this guy dies before he steps down. Like, for everybody would be like, you what did you do? You forced this guy into the White House and he died.
Well,
Like,
but I mean that's not unusual. I mean, it's like it's not like a
yes.
it's not like a constitutional crisis. I mean, we know what's going to happen, right, when the president
We
dies.
just need a strong leader. I'm hoping that what comes from all this mess, and then I really will let you go, is we have a lot of people in this country. We need one good person to rise to the occasion. I don't care if they're a Democrat or a Republican. We need an American president to take control. You know?
Right.
Just we
So
just need somebody.
so it's basically what you need is charisma, intelligence, and compassion, and you need to have all three
Compassion.
of them.
Yeah, all
Right.
three.
All three of them, right? Because you need the charisma because that's how you get taken seriously. You need the intelligence because you know how to navigate Washington, and you need the compassion because it's about benefiting the common people, right, through the
The
policies.
tall order.
Uh, and you know, yeah, we haven't had that. I mean, like like Trump and Obama. I mean, they were very charismatic people. Um, and I'm not going to comment on their other two features here. Um,
Yeah,
but um, but it was very very difficult to sort of get a nice trifecta and get positive things done. So
yeah. Maybe what it takes to be a president, the amount of politics that you have to go through, maybe it just can't happen. That's what I'm scared of. Like
yeah, so there was this interview that Obama recently had. It was before the election, and he was basically criticized for being too centrist throughout his rule. And he said, "Well, it's not because some lobbyist was controlling me. It was because we didn't have the votes, right? Because
yeah.
basically all the Republicans said, we're going to vote down everything that Obama puts up, right? There was a 60 vote majority, and that's why in the Senate in the beginning, that's why the Obamacare passed. And then Ted Kennedy died, and then there was a Republican came in, right? Uh, and and from then on, it was all downhill, right? That's why Obama is only known like the two big agenda items was the stimulus package after the Great Recession and then Obamacare, right? And he didn't do anything else. Um, and
Yeah,
yeah,
it started under him. Like the divide, like it wasn't like this under Bush. Maybe it was because of 9/11, but people were still working together on some level back then. Like I remember under Obama, they just would not work with him on anything at all. And then we had Trump, and it was like Obama times 10. I was like, oh my God, these people just would not work together. A Supreme Court justice used to get like 70% from both, like they used to get their whole party plus half of the other party. Like I think Ruth Bader Ginsburg got like 80 something percent of the Senate votes. Like that would never happen now at all. It's like this would never happen now, and that's a real shame.
I mean, so we assume the GOP, it keeps the Senate, and then let's say another Supreme Court justice dies or resigns within the next 4 years.
Oh, no way
Uh,
they're getting through.
right, it's gonna be disaster. Where I mean, like it was like Mitch McConnell, I believe, who said like if or another one of his surrogates who said, if we have to keep the like if Hillary Clinton had won in 2016, and the Scalia seat because Scalia died had um, to replace him, we're going to keep the Senate seat, sorry, the Supreme Court seat open for 4 years for the whole Hillary Clinton term, right? And I mean, that would have been totally crazy. Uh, and I mean, let's hope that they were just, saying that in jest, right?
Dude, that Mitch McConnell, I don't see him. I don't see him doing it. Like you would think that he would. I mean, also, I guess it depends. Like, I don't think anybody's gonna die before 2022, depending on what happens in 2022. But I don't think the American people, normal voters, don't really care so much. I mean, Republicans, like the people who are informed, they care. But the people you have to rally to make an election, they don't really know, man. Like, I remember not too long ago, I was asking somebody who they're going to vote for, and I said, Donald Trump or Joe Biden, and they didn't even know who Joe Biden was. They didn't even know who he was, man. Like, I was like, God, you're
Yeah.
voting? You don't even know who he is? He was vice president for 8 years.
Well, the thing with the Supreme Court is that like there would have to be some kind of controversial decisions, and so far it hasn't happened, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Obamacare, for instance, went to the court and it was sustained because John Roberts, was a Bush appointee, sided with Obamacare, so that's why it wasn't repealed.
Yeah.
So we would like I don't know what's going to happen with Roe v. Wade. I mean, people are going to be very
I just
fearful.
hope
But I don't think
they're
anything is
not
going
going
to
to do
change.
it. No way. They will not take, they're not going to do that. They
Ex-
the only thing that might happen is late. I don't know how it would work out, but they might say that late term abortion is illegal. But the conservative Supreme Courts don't normally take rights away from people. They expand rights, and also Amy Coney Barrett was talking about how like if something's already been ruled on, it would be kind of improper to overturn it. You know, if a Supreme Court in the past already ruled one way, it would be improper to overturn it. It would have to be something new that was brought to them for them to even take it up. Now, I mean, maybe I'll eat my words here, but I don't see them overturning that. I think what was the other big one? There was abortion, Obamacare. Who knows about that though? I mean, because the way they passed it was kind of unconstitutional. I don't know. You know, they didn't pass it with through Congress. They passed it with
Well,
well,
don't forget the reasoning that John Roberts was using to defend Obamacare, right? He said that it was basically a tax, right? A
yeah,
healthcare
okay.
tax, and then a tax, of course, is constitutional, right? But by definition, because otherwise the government can't make money. Um, so and I wouldn't know like what argument that they would have to use in order to bring Obamacare back to the court.
Well, what they need to do is expand it. See, the reason why Obamacare turned into such a disaster, they always blame Obama for Obamacare being such a disaster, but it was supposed to have two parts. It was supposed to have uh, a patient's bill of rights, so you couldn't discriminate against pre-existing conditions, and it was supposed to have a government option, right? The government option is what never got through. So the government option was meant to make a competitive market against the private insurance companies. So a normal person, any person can, they can get insurance through the government or they can choose a private company. So theoretically, private rates would have to go down because they would want to try to compete or have better care, one or the other, you know? And they never got the government option. So Obamacare just became a disaster. So the Republicans screwed Obama on Obamacare.
Right,
I'll
because
admit that.
because Obamacare is the same as Romney Care, right? Because so Romney was the governor of Massachusetts, and
Yeah, it was Yeah,
and it
exactly.
passed like like individual mandate with private insurance plans with multiple tiers, right? Like
Yeah.
high deductible, low deductible, whatever. So, and that's of course like a purely market-based option, and that's always going to be a failure, right? Because the private insurance is never going to, offer you like a completely good deal, right? Because they have to make money, right? So,
Yeah.
uh,
That's why I didn't like Trump. All he
well,
had to do was
well,
try to fix it, right?
well, Trump's idea was to get rid of the individual mandate, and then of course he wanted to get rid of Obamacare altogether. Uh, the only pledge that he made was to protect pre-existing conditions, but he didn't really roll out his own healthcare plan because he also doesn't really care, I don't think. So that's why, like,
That's a big failure.
yeah, I mean, the Republicans, they don't have a real plan because Obamacare was built on Romney care. Romney was a Republican, right? So,
Yeah.
it's basically Obama, quote unquote, stealing
Exactly.
the
You made
Republican
a good
healthcare
point.
plan.
Exactly.
And the
It was a
Republicans
Republican
themselves,
plan.
yeah, and the Republicans, they don't have another plan. I mean, the only other plan that would exist is the Bernie Sanders plan, which is Medicare for all.
And
And they're
that's
not going to go that
what
direction.
really pisses me off about these Republicans. I bet you, I mean, I know you don't think Trump cares. I think he ran because he does care. But he probably was convinced by all them people that Republicans are not for Medicare for all. And you know, he could have really done some things, man. He could have did Medicare for all. I think he should have did an amnesty. I know maybe I'm living in a dream world, but I thought that he should have did an amnesty as like the crown jewel of the immigration. Like build the wall, restructure the process so people can get here in an orderly line, a fair line, even if you're in Africa or anywhere in the world. Like it doesn't have to be just our neighbors, but like a real pathway to citizenship for anybody who wants to apply. And then, so we didn't have to break up families, he should have just granted amnesty. Reagan did it. So it's not uncommon for a Republican to do that. It happened in my lifetime, you know? And then think about all the Hispanics that would be brought into the Republican Party. The Republican Party would become the majority party if he would have done Medicare for all and amnesty. Who cares about the rednecks that are really racist or just not willing to change? I mean, they would be gone. Like,
Yeah, I mean, so the assumption you make is that Trump has positive intentions for the country, and
I think he listens to too
I
many wrong people.
yeah, I don't agree with that assessment. So,
Okay.
but okay, anyway, so we'll call it quits at this point. So, thank you
All
very
right,
much,
buddy.
Ronnie, and thank you for being at the podcast.